Loss of libido is rarely about hormones. It is not simple exhaustion, not a sign of aging, and not the absence of attraction. In-depth psychology, the disappearance of sexual desire is one of the most intelligent defense mechanisms the psyche possesses. Libido does not vanish because the body is broken. It vanishes because the psyche is overwhelmed. It withdraws sexuality to prevent a deeper collapse. When desire disappears, the unconscious is saying, "You are carrying too much. I need to protect you." Sexual desire requires openness, a readiness to feel, to respond, to be moved. It requires emotional space. When that space is filled with anxiety, grief, shame, resentment, or internal conflict, the libido shuts down, not as an enemy, but as a guardian. Consider someone whose libido suddenly collapses during a stressful period. Their mind insists they should still want intimacy, but their body refuses. The refusal is not laziness. It is the nervous system protecting itself from overload. Sexuality demands a shift into vulnerability, but vulnerability requires safety. When life feels chaotic, the psyche restricts desire so the person can focus on survival. The disappearance of libido becomes a temporary numbness, a psychological splint. Another example, a person who has unresolved anger toward their partner. They do not necessarily feel the anger consciously. Perhaps they suppress it to maintain harmony, but the body perceives the tension. Sexuality requires closeness, and closeness threatens to expose the hidden conflict. Instead of allowing the person to enter a situation where resentment might erupt, the psyche turns off desire. Libido becomes collateral damage in the attempt to preserve the relationship. The message of the body is, we cannot merge with someone we are secretly defending ourselves against. For others, libido loss emerges from emotional burden carried since childhood, a chronic sense of responsibility, guilt, or self-protection. A person who learned early that their needs were irrelevant may struggle to experience desire because desire is inherently selfish, not selfish in a negative sense, but in the sense of allowing oneself to want, to take, to enjoy. If wanting has historically been unsafe, the psyche may deny access to libido entirely. The person then interprets this as something is wrong with me, when in reality their psyche is trying to protect them from a forbidden emotional territory. Libido can also disappear in those who fear being seen too deeply. Sexuality is a moment of exposure, physical, emotional, psychological. For someone who carries internal shame, the idea of being witnessed while experiencing pleasure can feel impossible. The psyche responds by shutting down desire before the person faces the risk of vulnerability. This is not avoidance. It is protection from a fear that has never been spoken. Sometimes libido disappears because the relationship has become the container for unresolved childhood emotions. A partner might unconsciously resemble a parent, not physically, but emotionally. The child part of the psyche may feel obedient, intimidated, rejected, or suffocated. Eroticism cannot coexist with childlike emotional states. The libido shuts off not because of the partner, but because the role one occupies in the relationship triggers an old emotional posture that is incompatible with adult desire. There are even versions of libido loss rooted in grief. When a person carries long unprocessed sadness, the inner world becomes heavy. Sexuality requires expansion, but grief contracts the psyche. Desire cannot bloom in an emotional climate of tightness. The body cannot open while the heart is closed. In such cases, libido loss is not a dysfunction. It is mourning. One of the most misunderstood aspects of libido loss is that it often happens precisely when a person loves their partner deeply. They feel guilty and confused. But the loss of libido is not a measure of affection. It is a measure of emotional overload. The psyche shuts down sexuality to protect the relationship from deeper conflict or from emotional truths the person cannot bear to speak. Libido loss is not a problem to be solved by pressure or performance. It is a message. It speaks a language older than consciousness. Something inside you needs attention. Something inside you is tired. Something inside you cannot open until it feels safe again. When the emotional root of libido loss becomes understood, the shutdown loosens. Not immediately, not dramatically, but gradually. As the person gives space to the emotions that suppress desire, anger, grief, fear, exhaustion, unmet needs, the psyche no longer needs to block sexuality. Desire returns naturally when the protection is no longer required. Libido is not a switch. It is an emotional barometer. When it drops, the psyche is not failing. It is protecting. And when the person learns to listen to that protection, the libido does not merely come back. It returns in a form that is more truthful, more stable, and more connected than before.